as being transported where they please, as Habakkuk was from Jeri to Babylon, or as Philip, after he had baptized the eunuch to Azores, and one of these went from me to a friend of mine in Devonshire, and came and brought me an answer to London the some day, which is 4 days' journey. They caught me excellent predictions of astrology and earthquakes. They slack the plague in cities. They silence the violent winds and tempests. They calm the rage of the sea and rivers. They walk in the air, they frustrate the malicious aspects of witches. They cure all diseases. The writings of John Haydon are considered a most important contribution to Rosicrucian literature. John Haydon was probably related to Sir Christopher Haydon, a seraphically illuminated Rosicrucian, whom the late F. Lee Gardner, Honourable Secretary Sec. Ross, in Anglia, believes to have been the source of his Rosicrucian knowledge. In his Bibliotheca Rosicruciana he makes the following statement concerning John Haydon: on the whole, from the internal evidence of his writings, he appears to have gone through the lower grade of the RC order and to have given out much of this to the world. John Haydon travelled extensively, visiting Arabia, Egypt, Persia, and various parts of Europe, as related in a biographical introduction to his work, The Wise Man's Crown, set with angels, planets, metals, etc., or The Glory of the Rosy Cross, a work declared by him to be a translation into English of the mysterious book and brought from Arabia by Christian Rosenkreutz. Thomas von Eugenius Philelebs, another champion of the order, corroborates the statement of John Haydon concerning the ability of the Rosicrucian initiates to make themselves invisible at will. The fraternity of RC can move in this white mist. Whosoever would communicate with us must be able to see in this light, or us he will never see unless by our own will. The fraternity of RC is an august and sovereign body, arbitrarily manipulating the symbols of alchemy, Kabbalism, astrology, and magic to the attainment of its own peculiar purposes, but entirely independent of the cults whose terminology it employs. The three major objects of the fraternity are 1. The abolition of all monarchical forms of government and the substitution therefore of the rulership of the philosophic elect. The present democracies are the direct outgrowth of Rosicrucian efforts to liberate the Moors from the domination of despotism. In the early part of the 18th century the Rosicrucians turned their attention to the new American colonies, then forming the nucleus of a great nation in the New World. The American War of Independence represents their first great political experiment and resulted in the establishment of a national government founded upon the fundamental principles of divine and natural law. As an imperishable reminder of their sub rosa activities, the Rosicrucians left the Great Seal of the United States. The Rosicrucians were also the instigators of the French Revolution, but in this instance were not wholly successful, owing to the fact that the fanaticism of the revolutionists could not be controlled and the reign of terror ensued. 2. The reformation of science, philosophy, and ethics. The Rosicrucians declared that the material arts and sciences were but shadows of the divine wisdom, and that only by penetrating the innermost recesses of nature could man attain to reality and understanding. Though calling themselves Christians, the Rosicrucians were evidently Platonists and also profoundly versed in the deepest mysteries of early Hebrew and Hindu theology. There is undeniable evidence that the Rosicrucians desired to re-establish the institutions of the ancient mysteries as the foremost method of instructing humanity in the secret and eternal doctrine. Indeed, being in all probability the perpetuators of the ancient mysteries, the Rosicrucians were able to maintain themselves against the obliterating forces of dogmatic Christianity only by absolute secrecy and the subtlety of their subterfuges. They so carefully guarded and preserved the supreme mystery, the identity and inner relationship of the three selves, that no one to whom they did not of their own accord reveal themselves has ever secured any satisfactory information regarding either the existence or the purpose of the order. The fraternity of RC, through its outer organization, is gradually creating an environment or body in which the illustrious brother CRC may ultimately incarnate and consummate for humanity the vast spiritual and material labors of the fraternity. 3. The discovery of the universal medicine, or panacea, for all forms of disease. There is ample evidence that the Rosicrucians were successful in their quest for the elixir of life. In his Theatrum Chemicum Britannicum, Elias Ashmole states that the Rosicrucians were not appreciated in England, but were welcomed on the continent. He also states that Queen Elizabeth was twice cured of the smallpox by the Brethren of the Rosy Cross, and that the Earl of Norfolk was healed of leprosy by a Rosicrucian physician. In the quotations that follow it is hinted by John Haydon that the brothers of the fraternity possessed the secret of prolonging human existence indefinitely, but not beyond the time appointed by the will of God, and at last they could restore by the same course every brother that died to life again, and so continue many ages. The rules you find in the 4th book. After this manner began the fraternity of the Rosy Cross, first by 4 persons, who died and rose again until Christ, and then they came to worship as the star guided them to Bethlehem of Judea, where lay our Saviour in his mother's arms. And then they opened their treasure and presented unto him gifts, gold, frankincense, and myrrh, and by the commandment of God went home to their habitation. These 4 waxing young again successively many hundreds of years, made a magical language in writing, with a large dictionary, which we at daily use to God's praise and glory, and do find great wisdom therein. Now whilst Brother C.R. was in a proper womb quickening, they concluded to draw and receive yet others more into their fraternity. The womb herein referred to was apparently the glass casket, or container, in which the brothers were buried. This was also called the philosophical egg. After a certain period of time the philosopher, breaking the shell of his egg, came forth and functioned for a prescribed period, after which he retired again into his shell of glass. The Rosicrucian medicine for the healing of all human infirmities may be interpreted either as a chemical substance which produces the physical effects described, or as spiritual understanding, the true healing power which, when a man has partaken of it, reveals truth to him. Ignorance is the worst form of disease, and that which heals ignorance is therefore the most potent of all medicines. The perfect Rosicrucian medicine was for the healing of nations, races, and individuals. In an early unpublished manuscript, an unknown philosopher declares alchemy, Kabbalism, astrology, and magic to have been divine sciences originally, but that through perversion they had become false doctrines, leading seekers after wisdom ever farther from their goal. The same author gives a valuable key to esoteric Rosicrucianism by dividing the path of spiritual attainment into 3 steps, or schools, which he calls mountains. The first and lowest of these mountains is Mount Sophia. The second, Mount Kabbalah. And the third, Mount Magia. These 3 mountains are sequential stages of spiritual growth. The unknown author then states by philosophy is to be understood the knowledge of the workings of nature, by which knowledge man learns to climb to those higher mountains above the limitations of sense. By Kabbalism is to be understood the language of the angelic or celestial beings, and he who masters it is able to converse with the messengers of God. On the highest of the mountains is the school of Magia, divine magic, which is the language of God, wherein man is taught the true nature of all things by God himself. There is a growing conviction that if the true nature of Rosicrucianism were divulged, it would cause consternation, to say the least. Rosicrucian symbols have many meanings, but the Rosicrucian meaning has not yet been revealed. The mount upon which stands the house of the Rosy Cross is still concealed by clouds, in which the brethren hide both themselves and their secrets. Michael Mayer writes, "What is contained in the Fama and Confessio is true. It is a very childish objection that the brotherhood have promised so much and performed so little. With them, as elsewhere, many are called but few are chosen. The masters of the order hold out the rose as the remote prize, but they impose the cross on those who are entering." See Selenium Post Clamores, by Mayer, and the Rosicrucians and the Freemasons, by De Quincey. The rose and the cross appear upon the stained glass windows of Lichfield Chapter House, where Walter Conrad Arendsburg believes Lord Bacon and his mother to have been buried. A crucified rose within a heart is watermarked into the dedication page of the 1628 edition of Robert Burton's Anatomy of Melancholy. The fundamental symbols of the Rosicrucians were the rose and the cross. The rose female and the cross male, both universal phallic emblems. While such learned gentlemen as Thomas Inman, Hargrave Jennings, and Richard Paynight have truly observed that the rose and the cross typify the generative processes, these scholars seem unable to pierce the veil of symbolism. They do not realize that the creative mystery in the material world is merely a shadow of the divine creative mystery in the spiritual world. Because of the phallic significance of their symbols, both the Rosicrucians and the Templars